hard hurdle that most people have to overcome. Is do I actually have the capacity to do this? It's overwhelming. So let me tell you just a little bit of my background. And we developed something called the entrepreneur appetite test that I alluded to a little bit earlier. And our entire office took this test. Okay, I'm like the ultimate entrepreneur, right? 28 companies. You guys pretty impressed? Guess what? I failed the test. I got the lowest score of anyone in our office. And as I looked at that, it really bothered me. And it kind of concerned me. And thought, do I really have what it takes to be an entrepreneur? And I realized, you know what? I don't. None of us do. We're all screwed up. We're all messed up, okay? Every single one of us. And anyone that isn't, I want to see them. Because we have strengths and we have weaknesses, and God has put us on this earth for a purpose that way. And so the trick is indeed to align with people that augment where you're weak. There's a real amazing individual that I heard this story about and now have become really closely associated with out of Ahmedabad, India. Through my career, I've worked with probably 50 companies in India. At Novell, I led the efforts to get one of the first ones into India to do engineering work. And I was so amazed with this little group I kept bumping into in India. And I dug his story a little bit, and here's what I discovered. This individual grew up in the third caste, or the third tier system in India, which it's pretty tough to break out of that, okay? So there's not one person in this group that has that low of a starting point. And he decided he was going to be an entrepreneur. So he took his pedal bike, he pedaled it down to the local market. This is what it looks like, and like that. And purchased the components, saved up for like a month, saved enough to buy components for one computer, pedaled his bike back, put the computer together, took it, went down, sold it. He repeated that process for like a year, saving up enough money. Okay, the other side of this is 20 years later, he now owns the only company that I'll do business with in India. He has the contract for the national government in India and at least 3 or 4 countries in Europe. So literally, he simply would not die. He simply decided he was going to do it. You know, so many people think that entrepreneurship is this great, perfect strategy and plan where you do your pro forma, you do your business plan, you do this great, great, perfect, logical thinking. Any of you think that's right? I used to. That's where I started. You know what I've discovered? It's not. It's wandering in the fog. In all the 5-year business plans I've done, in all the 5-year models, not once has it ever held up longer than a couple of 3 months. I had a great mentor early in my, well, I guess midway through my career, a guy named Lad Christensen. Lad co-founded Huntsman Chemical with John Huntsman. He founded Vinca. He was involved in Deer Valley. Really pretty and amazing entrepreneur. I'd just come out of the corporate world and was applying all of my great skills. And one day he called me into his office and was really frustrated at me and says, "Rich, define entrepreneurship." And I rattled back some really lame textbook answer, at what point he looked at me and said, "Wrong, wrong. What it is having the courage to wander in the fog." The reality is the only time you really get to see the vision real clearly is when you start. You look at a beacon out on the hill, and then instantly what you do is you jump into the mucky, yucky, messy swamp, and you begin thrashing around in the general direction of your goal. And then every once in a while you get this wonderful little opportunity to get onto a piece of dry land. Then you climb the tree, you get up, you get your bearings again, and you know what? Right back down into the mucky swamp you go. Very seldom is true entrepreneurship pristine and clean and perfect and rigid. More often than not, it's messy and it's mucky and it's rather strenuous. See, the thing that most people miss is you get multiple swings, guys. We kind of think in the terms of baseball and games. You know what? It's not a 3 strikes you're out game. As I mentioned earlier, my first 6 attempts, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I mean, 6 attempts were terrible failures. But you know what? That 7th and 8th were actually pretty amazing successes. What I have learned to do through my career is actually to fail better. I've simply become much more efficient at failing. I learned to fail quicker. Most people perceive failure as a permanent condition. The reality is failure is not permanent, nor is success. Both failure and success are very temporary conditions. So getting into that mindset is a really powerful thing. So I did this up at BYU, and I've been really excited to, I did this a month or so ago at BYU. I've been really excited to do this again. This is fun. I've got a $100 bill here. Anybody want it? Raise your hand if you want it. Close. Okay, do you still want it? Why do you want it? It's still worth the same thing. Anybody still want it? Why? Stupid $100 bill. So I contend, as an individual and an entrepreneur, the more stomping, the more scars, the more battle wounds you have, the more valuable you become. One of my peers introduced me on a talk show a little while back, and it was the ultimate compliment. And here's how he introduced me. He says, Rich has more knife scars on him, more battle wounds than anyone I've met in my entire life. And if you don't believe it, have him show him. He's got the wounds of a 160-year-old man. You know what? That's a compliment to me. And so failure actually isn't a crippling factor. Don't be afraid of failure. Failure is just part of the game. This younger brother that I mentioned earlier is one of my life heroes. And this is actually a part of the book. I'm just going to jump in and out of parts of the book here now quickly. And this brother's name is Brett. He's one of those rare individuals that all through his life he's nailed it. In high school, he set a state record. He was the valedictorian, 4.0 student body president. Goes to college. He was the younger brother that I told you about that they says don't go into engineering school because it's GPA suicide. He did it anyways, got the highest GPA that's ever been achieved out of that major. Went on to Columbia, then went on to Johns Hopkins, head resident. All through his life he's nailed it. And I knew his philosophy, but he articulated it really good to me one night over dinner. I says, Brett, tell me what your philosophy is. Just tell me what you do. And he said this very wise thing. He said, do the hard thing. You see, instantly, when you decide to do the hard thing, you've dismissed 98% of the competition because they're what? They're doing the easy thing. So instantly, you've dismissed 98 out of 100 people. And then instantly, also, you've distinguished yourself. That's why I made the recommendation earlier that if you blend two weird disciplines, you distinguish yourself. So the challenge I would leave you guys is do the hard thing. One of the things that's concerned me through my career, and I've read most of the entrepreneur books, is that many of them teach you have to be willing to give up your family, you have to be willing to give your friends, your trust relationships, you have to be willing to basically be unethical and do all these crazy things to succeed. And that really troubled and really disturbed me. I'd been a huge fan of Ed Viesturs for years. Matter of fact, Ed's one of the endorsers of the book. Does anyone know who Ed Viesturs is? Oh, 1, 2, okay. It amazes me. Ed's one of my life heroes. I'm a high-altitude climber. I absolutely love the Himalayas and mountains. And Ed's done something amazing. He makes Tiger Woods and Michael Jordan look like Mickey Mouse and Donald Duck, in my opinion. Ed has climbed all 14 8,000-meter summits in the world without the use of supplemental oxygen. The 96 disaster that you guys may into thin air, he was the guy that went up and did all the rescuing and that. Ed's just an unbelievable person, both in his climbing and also in his personal life. I had tremendous respect for Ed. He became a life hero to me when I saw what happened on Annapurna. Keeping in mind he'd climbed all the other 13-meter summits. The rest of the world actually does watch climbing, so the whole world was basically watching to see what would happen. And he had attempted to climb Annapurna 2 or 3 other times. Now, keeping in mind, Annapurna, 1 out of 2 people that make it to the top die. Okay, so he's on his 3rd assault up Annapurna, and he and his climbing partner, Vika Gustafsson, had decided that they were going to take the back route into what's called the death zone. So they're spending 2 or 3 nights above where your body basically starts to disintegrate. They didn't even know if it was humanly possible. They climb up, they get to the final day, they have to go across this little cornice before they get to the summit peak. They're getting there, and they look, and all of a sudden, Ed and Vika say, hey, you know, this just doesn't feel right. We're not going to do it. The 2 guys that they were climbing with went across the cornice, they hit the summit, they went back down. In the meantime, Ed and Vika, tromping down the mountain, a couple of days later, arrived back in base camp pretty wasted. And the whole world starts saying,